Of Biology, Reproduction. Class 12. This unit consists of 4 chapters. Chapter 1, Reproduction in Organisms. Chapter 2, Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. Chapter 3, Human Reproduction. Chapter 4, Reproductive Health. Morning everyone. Welcome to our channel Science Science. You're looking at the audio chapter of class 12th Biology. So, as we started a new unit, and we all know that every single unit of biology mentions about a scientist. So, in this unit, they have mentioned about Panchanan Maheshwari, who was born in November 1904 in Jaipur, Rajasthan. Panchanan Maheshwari rose to become one of the most distinguished botanists, not only of India but of the entire world. He moved to Allahabad for higher education, where he obtained his TSc during his college days. He was inspired by Dr. W. Dudgeon, an American missionary teacher, to develop interest in botany and especially morphology. His teacher once expressed that if his student progresses ahead of him, it will give him a great satisfaction. These words encouraged Panchanan to inquire what he could do for his teacher in return. He worked on embryological aspects and popularized the use of embryological characters in taxonomy. He established the Department of Botany, University of Delhi, as an important center of research in the embryology and tissue culture. He also emphasized the need for initiation of work on artificial culture of immature embryos. These days, tissue culture has become a landmark in science. His work on test tube fertilization and intra-ovarian pollination won worldwide acclaim. He was honored with Fellowship of Royal Society of London, FRS, Indian National Science Academy, and several other institutions of excellence. He encouraged general education and made a significant contribution to school education by his leadership in bringing out the very first textbooks of biology for higher secondary schools, published by NCERT in 1964. Chapter 1, Reproduction in Organisms. Each and every organism can live only for a certain period of time. The period from birth to the natural death of an organism represents its lifespan. Lifespans of a few organisms are given in figure 1.1. Several other organisms are drawn for which you should find out their lifespans and write in the spaces provided. Examine the lifespans of organisms represented in figure 1.1. Isn't it both interesting and intriguing to note that it may be as short as few days or as long as few thousand years? Between these two extremes are the lifespans of most other living organisms. You may note that lifespans of organisms are not necessarily correlated with their sizes. The sizes of crows and parrots are not very different, yet their lifespans show a wide difference. Similarly, a mango tree has a much shorter lifespan as compared to a peepal tree. Whatever be the lifespan, death of every individual organism is a certainty. That is, no individual is immortal except single celled organisms. Why do we say there is no natural death in single celled organism? Given this reality, have you ever wondered how vast number of plants and animal species have existed on earth for several thousands of years? There must be some process in living organisms that ensure this continuity. Yes, we are talking about the reproduction, something that we take for granted. Let's look at the lifespans of these organisms. If we talk about the elephant, it is 65 years. If we talk about a rose, it is 5 to 7 years. If we talk about a dog, it is 20 to 30 years. Butterfly is 1 to 2 weeks. Crow is 15 years. Banana tree is 25 years. Cow is 20 to 25 years. Parrot is 140 years. Crocodile 60 years. Horse 60 years. Fruit fly around 1 month. Rice plant 3 to 4 months. Tortoise is 100 to 150 years. Banyan tree is around 200 years. So these are the approximate lifespans of some organisms. Now we talk about the reproduction is defined as a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young ones or offspring that is similar to itself. The offspring grow, mature, and in turn produce new offspring. Thus, there is a cycle of birth, growth, and death. Reproduction enables the continuity of the species generation after generation. You will study later in Chapter 5, Principles of Inheritance and Variation, how genetic variation is created and inherited during reproduction. There is a large diversity in the biological world, and each organism has evolved its own mechanism to multiply and produce offspring. The organism's habits, its internal physiology, and several other factors are collectively responsible for how it reproduces. Based on whether there is participation of one organism or two in the process of reproduction, it is of two types. When offspring is produced by a single parent with or without the involvement of gamete formation, the reproduction is asexual. When two parents of opposite sex participate in a reproductive process and also involve fusion of male and a female gametes, it is called sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction. In this method, a single individual or parent is capable of producing offspring. As a result, the offspring that are produced are not only identical to one another but are also exact copies of their parent. Are these offsprings likely to be genetically identical or different? They are genetically identical. The term clone is used to describe such morphologically and genetically similar individuals. Now let us look at the diagrams. The diagram A is budding in yeast, and the diagram B is binary fission in amoeba, in which there is amoeba is dividing, and first the karyokinesis is happening like nuclear division, and then the cytokinesis, the cell division, and that forms two daughter cells. Now let us see how widespread asexual reproduction is. Among different group of organisms, asexual reproduction is common among single-celled organisms and in plants and animals with relatively simple organizations. In protists and monerans, the organisms or the parent cell divides by mitosis into two to give rise to new individuals. Thus, in these organisms, cell division is itself a mode of reproduction. Many single-celled organisms reproduce by binary fission, where a cell divides into two halves and each rapidly grows into an adult. Example, amoeba paramecium. In yeast, the division is unequal and small buds are produced that remain attached initially to the parent cell, which eventually get separated and mature into new yeast organisms. Under unfavorable condition, the amoeba withdraws its pseudopodia and secretes a three-layered hard covering or cyst around itself. The phenomena is termed as encystation. When favorable conditions return, the encysted amoeba divides by multiple fission and produces many minute amoeba or pseudopodiospores. The cyst wall bursts out and the spores are liberated in the surrounding medium to grow up into many amoeba. This phenomena is known as sporulation. Members of kingdom fungi and simple plants such as algae reproduce through special asexual reproductive structures. The most common of these structures are zoospores that usually are microscopic motile structures. Other common asexual reproductive structures are conidia in penicillium, buds in hydra, and gemmules in sponge. Now let us look at the diagrams of these, which is figure 1.3. The diagram A is zoospores in chlamydomonas and diagram B is conidia in penicillium. Diagram C is the bud in the hydra and diagram D is gemmules in the sponges. You have learned about the vegetative reproduction in plants in class 11th. What do you think, is vegetative reproduction also a type of asexual reproduction? What do you so? Why do you say so? In the term Is the term clone applicable to the offspring formed by vegetative reproduction? While in animals and other simple organisms the term asexual is used unambiguously, in plants the term vegetative reproduction is frequently used. In plants, the units of vegetative propagation, such as runner, rhizome, sucker, tuber, offset, bulb, are all capable of giving rise to new offspring. Figure 1.4. These structures are called vegetative propagules. Now let's just look at the diagrams. Figure 1.4, vegetative propagules in angiosperms. So first is I in potato, rhizome in ginger, bulbil of agave, which is C, D is leaf buds of bryophyllum, E is offset of water hyacinth. Obviously, since the formation of these structures does not involve two parents, the process involved is asexual. In some organisms, if the body breaks into distinct pieces or fragments, each fragment grows into adult, capable of producing offspring. Example, Hydra. This is also a mode of asexual reproduction called fragmentation. You must have heard about the scourge of the water bodies or about the terror of Bengal. This is nothing but the aquatic plant water hyacinth, which is one of the most invasive weeds found growing wherever there is standing water. It drains oxygen from the water, which leads to the death of fishes. You will learn more about it in chapter 13 and 14. You may find it interesting to know that this plant was introduced in India because of its beautiful flowers and shape of leaves. Since it can propagate vegetatively at a phenomenal rate and spread all over the water body in a short period of time, it is very difficult to get rid of them. Are you aware how plants like potato, sugarcane, banana, ginger, dahlia are cultivated? Have you seen small plants emerging from the buds called eyes of the potato tuber, from the rhizomes of banana and ginger? When you carefully try to determine the site of origin of the new plantlets in the plants listed above, you will notice that they invariably arise from the nodes present in the modified stems of these plants. When the nodes come in contact with damp soil or water, they produce roots and new plants. Similarly, adventitious buds arise from notches present at the margins of leaves of bryophyllum. This ability is fully exploited by the gardeners and farmers of commercial propagation of such plants. This ability is fully exploited by gardeners and farmers for commercial propagation of such plants. It is interesting to note that asexual reproduction is the common method of reproduction in organisms that have a relatively simple organization, like algae and fungi, and that they shift to sexual method of reproduction just before the onset of adverse conditions. Find out how sexual reproduction enables these organisms to survive during unfavorable conditions. Why is sexual reproduction favored under such conditions? Asexual or vegetative as well as sexual modes of reproduction are exhibited by the higher plants. On the other hand, only sexual mode of reproduction is present in most of the animals. Sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves formation of the male and female gametes, either by the same individual or by different individuals of the opposite sex. These gametes fuse to form the zygote, which develops to form the new organism. It is an elaborate, complex, and slow process as compared to asexual reproduction. Because of the fusion of male and female gametes, sexual reproduction results in offsprings that are not identical to parents or among themselves. A study of diverse organisms, plants, animals, or fungi show that though they differ so greatly in external morphology, internal structure, and physiology, when it comes to sexual mode of reproduction, surprisingly they share a similar pattern. Let us first discuss what features are common to these diverse organisms. All organisms have to reach a certain stage of growth and maturity in their life before they can reproduce sexually. That period of growth is called the juvenile phase. It is known as vegetative phase in plants. This phase is of variable duration in different organisms. The end of juvenile or vegetative phase, which marks the beginning of the reproductive phase, can be seen easily in the higher plants when they come to flower. How long does it take for marigold, rice, wheat, coconut, mango plant to come to flower? In some plants where flowering occurs more than once, what would you call the interflowering period? Juvenile or mature? I guess the mature. Observe a few trees in your area. Do they flower during the same month, year after year? Why do you think the availability of fruits like mango, apple, jackfruit, etc. is seasonal? Are there some plants that flower throughout the year and some others that show seasonal flowering? Plants, the annual and biennial types, show clear-cut vegetative, reproductive and senescent phases. But in perennial species, it is very difficult to clearly define these phases. A few plants exhibit unusual flowering phenomena. Some of them, such as bamboo species, flower only once in their lifetime, generally after 50 to 100 years, produces a large number of fruits and die. Another plant, Strobilanthes kuntiana, Neela Kuranji, flowers once in 12 years. As many of you would know, this plant flowered during September-October 2006. Its mass flowering transformed large tracts of hilly areas in Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu into blue stretches and attracted a large number of tourists. In animals, the juvenile phase is followed by the morphological and physiological changes prior to active reproductive behavior. The reproductive phase is also of variable duration in different organisms. Can you list the changes seen in human beings that are indicative of reproductive maturity? Among animals, for example birds, do they lay eggs all through the year or is it seasonal phenomena? What about other animals like frogs and lizards? You will notice that birds living in nature lay eggs only seasonally. However, birds in captivity, as in poultry farms, can be made to lay eggs throughout the year. In this case, laying eggs is not related to reproduction but is a commercial exploitation for human welfare. The females of placental mammals exhibit cyclical changes in the activities of ovaries and accessory ducts as well as hormones during the reproductive phase. In non-primate mammals like cows, sheep, rats, deers, dogs, tiger, etc., such cyclical changes during reproduction are called oestrus cycle, whereas in primates, monkeys, apes and humans, it is called menstrual cycle. Many mammals, especially those living in nature, wild conditions, exhibit such cycles only during favorable seasons in their reproductive phase and are therefore called seasonal breeders. Many other mammals are reproductively active throughout their reproductive phase and hence are called continuous breeders. That we all grow old if we live long enough is something that we recognize. But what is meant by growing old? The end of reproductive phase can be considered as one of the parameters of senescence or old age. There are concomitant changes in the body like slowing of metabolism, etc. During this last phase of lifespan, old age ultimately leads to death in both plants and animals. Hormones are responsible for transitions between the three phases. Interaction between hormones and certain environmental factors regulate the reproductive processes and the associated behavioral expressions of organisms. Events in sexual reproduction. After attainment of maturity, all sexually reproducing organisms exhibit events and processes that have remarkable fundamental similarity, even though the structures associated with sexual reproductions are indeed very different. The events of sexual reproduction, though elaborate and complex, follow a regular sequence. Sexual reproduction is characterized by the fusion or fertilization of the male and female gametes, the formation of a zygote, and embryogenesis. For convenience, these sequential events may be grouped into three distinct stages, namely the pre-fertilization, fertilization, and the post-fertilization events. Pre-fertilization events. These includes all the events of sexual reproduction prior to the fusion of gametes. The two main pre-fertilization events are gametogenesis and gamete transfer. Gametogenesis. As you are already aware, gametogenesis refers to the process of formation of the two type of gametes, male and female. The gametes are haploid cells. Now the figure 1.5, there are type of gametes shown. A is isogametes of cladophora and algae. Isogametes means they look similar. You cannot identify which one is the male and which one is the female actually. And the B is heterogametes of fucus and algae. C is heterogametes of Homo sapiens or human beings. Heterogametes are actually morphologically different. In some algae, the two gametes are so similar in appearance that it is not possible to categorize them into male and female gametes. They are hence called homogametes or isogametes. However, in a majority of sexually reproducing organisms, the gametes produced are of two morphologically distinct types, or heterogametes. In such organisms, the male gamete is called the antherozoid or sperm, and the female gamete is called the egg or ovum. Sexuality in organisms. Sexual reproduction in organisms generally involves the fusion of gametes from two different individuals, but this is not always true. From your recollection of examples studied in class 11th, can you identify cases where self-fertilization was observed? Of course, citing such examples in plants is easy. Plants may have both male and female reproductive structures in the same plant, bisexual, or on different plants, unisexual. In several fungi and plants, terms such as homothelic or monoecious are used to denote the bisexual condition, and heterothelic or dioecious are the terms used to describe unisexual condition. In flowering plants, the unisexual male flower is staminate, that is bearing stamens, while the female is pistillate or bearing pistils. In some flowering plants, both male and female flowers may be present on same individual, monoecious, or on separate individuals, dioecious. Some examples of monoecious plants are cucurbits and coconuts, and of dioecious plants are papaya and date palm. Name the type of gametes that are formed in staminate and pistillate flowers. Cell division during gamete formation. Gametes in all heterogametic species are of two types, namely male and a female. Gametes are haploid, though the parent plant body from which they arise may be either haploid or diploid. A haploid parent body produces gametes by mitotic division. Does this mean that meiosis never occurs in organisms that are haploid? No. This is not true. Carefully examine the flow charts of life cycle of algae that you have studied in class 11th, chapter 3 to get a suitable answer. Several organisms belonging to Monera, fungi, algae, and bryophytes have haploid plant body, but in organisms belonging to pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, and most of the animals, including human beings, the parental body is diploid. It is obvious that meiosis, the reduction division, has to occur if the diploid body has to produce haploid gametes. Let us look at the diagram 1.6. A is the diagram of earthworm, which is a bisexual organism. B is the diagram of cockroach, which is a unisexual organism. So there is a morphologically distinct, like male and female. C is monoecious organism, which we call as Cara. In this, a single plant is having the female sex organ and the male sex organ at the same time in the same organism. And D is the dioecious plant, in which there is separate female thallus and a male thallus. Female thallus have archegoniophore and the male thallus has antheridiophore. For a trick, if you want to remember that which one is archegoniophore and which one is antheridiophore, just look at the beauty. The how beautifully they have grown, or you can say drawn the image of the sexually reproducing thing on the female thallus. So the beautiful is female, so archegoniophore, and the ugly one is the antheridiophore. Just a trick, nothing to hurt someone. And E is bisexual flower of sweet potato. There is stamen and pistil carpel both present. There is table 1.1 chromosome numbers in myocytes and gametes of some organism. Fill in the blank spaces. Actually nothing, just chromosome number in myocyte is 2n and chromosome number in gametes is n. Although you can find so many mnemonics to memorize these, and I guess you should memorize these because they are actually important from the point of view of examination also. So just find out some mnemonic, or else I will put some mnemonic on the other video. In diploid organisms, specialized cells called myocytes or gamete mother cell undergo meiosis. At the end of meiosis, only one set of chromosomes get incorporated into each gamete. Carefully study table 1.1 and fill in the diploid and haploid chromosome number of organisms. Is there any relationship in the number of chromosomes of myocytes and gametes? Obviously, the number of chromosomes in myocytes are double the number of chromosomes present in the gametes. Now the gamete transfer. After their formation, male and a female gametes must be physically brought together to facilitate fusion or fertilization. Have you ever wondered how the gametes meet? In majority of organisms, male gamete is motile and the female gamete is stationary. Exceptions are a few fungi and algae, in which both type of gametes are motile. There is a need for a medium through which the male gametes move. In several simple plants like algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, water is the medium through which this gamete transfer takes place. A large number of the male gametes, however, fail to reach the female gametes. To compensate this loss of male gametes during transport, the number of male gametes produced is several thousand times the number of female gametes produced. In seed plants, pollen grains are the carriers of male gametes and ovule have the egg. Pollen grains produced in anther therefore have to be transferred to the stigma before it can lead to fertilization. Figure 1.7b. In bisexual or self-fertilizing plants, example peas, Transfer of a pollen grains to the stigma is relatively easy as anthers and stigma are located close to each other. Pollen grains, soon after they are shed, come in contact with the stigma. But in cross-pollinating plants, including dioecious plants, a specialized event called pollination facilitates transfer of pollen grains to the stigma. Pollen grains germinate on the stigma, and the pollen tubes carrying the male gametes reach the ovule and discharge male gametes near the egg. In dioecious animals, since male and female gametes are formed in different individuals, the organism must evolve a special mechanism for gamete transfer. Successful transfer and coming together of gametes is essential for the most critical event in the sexual reproduction, the fertilization. Now let us look at the diagram or the figure 1.7. A is homogametic contact in algae. This is the homogametic contact in the algae. The fusion of gametes is happening and the zygote is formed, and then the fusion of nucleus is happening, which forms a new individual. And the B is germinating pollen grains on the stigma of flower. Okay. So the round thing is the pollen grains, and the yellow colored tubes running into this are the pollen tubes, okay, through which the pollen grains travel to the ovary, or you can say reaches to the ovum to fertilize. Now fertilization. The most vital event of sexual reproduction is perhaps the fusion of gametes. This process, called Singam Ii, results in the formation of diploid zygote. The term fertilization is also often used for this purpose. The terms Singam Ii and fertilization are frequently used, though interchangeably. What would happen if Singam Ii does not occur? However, it has to be mentioned here that in some organisms like rotifers, honeybees, and even some lizards and birds, turkey, the female gamete undergoes development to form new organisms without fertilization. This phenomenon is called Parthenogenesis. Where does Singam Ii occur? In most aquatic organisms, such as majority of algae and fishes as well as amphibians, Singam Ii occurs in the external medium or the water, that is outside the body of organism. This type of gametic fusion is called external fertilization. Organisms exhibiting external fertilization show great synchrony between the sexes and release a large number of gametes into the surrounding medium, water, in order to enhance the chances of Singam Ii. This happens in the bony fishes and frogs, where a large number of offsprings are produced. A major disadvantage is that the offsprings are extremely vulnerable to predators threatening their survival up to adulthood. In many terrestrial organisms belonging to fungi, higher animals such as reptiles, birds, mammals, and in a majority of plants, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, Singam Ii occurs inside the body of the organism. Hence, the process is called internal fertilization. In all these organisms, egg is formed inside the female body, where they fuse with the male gamete. In organisms exhibiting internal fertilization, the male gamete is motile and has to reach the egg in order to fuse with it. In these, even though the number of sperms reduces very large, there is a significant reduction in the number of eggs produced. In seed plants, however, the non-motile male gametes are carried to female gamete by pollen tubes. Post-fertilization events. Events in sexual reproduction after the formation of zygotes are called post-fertilization events. The zygote. Formation of the diploid zygote is universal and in all sexually reproducing organisms. The organisms with external fertilization, the zygote is formed in the external medium, usually water. whereas in those exhibiting internal fertilization, zygote is formed inside the body of the organism. Further development of the zygote depends on the type of life cycle the organism has and the environment it is exposed to. In organism belonging to fungi and algae, zygote develops a thick wall that is resistant to desiccation and damage. It undergoes a period of rest before germination. In organism with haplontic life cycle, as you have read in class 11, zygote divides by meiosis to form haploid spores that grow into haploid individuals. Consult the class 11 book and find out what kind of a development takes place in the zygote in organism with diplontic and haplodiplontic life cycles. In the diplontic life cycle, zygote divides mitotically and forms the diploid body, and in the haplodiplontic life cycles, the zygote divide mitotically to form sporophyte, and then sporophyte forms the gametes and the gametophytic body. And further, I guess you should check out the 11th class book also. Now, zygote is the vital link that ensures continuity or species between organisms of one generation and the next. Every sexually reproducing organism, including human beings, begin life as a single cell, the zygote. Embryogenesis. Embryogenesis refers to the process of development of embryo from the zygote. During embryogenesis, a zygote undergoes cell division, mitosis, and cell differentiation. While cell divisions increase the number of cells in the developing embryo, cell differentiation helps group of cells to undergo certain modifications to form specialized tissues and organs to form an organism. You have studied about the process of cell division and differentiation in the previous class. Animals are categorized into oviparous and viviparous based on whether the development of a zygote takes place outside the body of female parent or inside. That is, whether they lay fertilized or unfertilized egg or give birth to young ones. In oviparous animals like reptiles and birds, the fertilized eggs covered by hard calcareous shell are laid in a safe place in the environment. After a period of incubation, young ones hatch out. On the other hand, the viviparous animals, majority of mammals including human beings, the zygote develops into a young one inside the body of the female organism. After attaining a certain stage of growth, the young ones are delivered out of the body of the female organism. Because of proper embryonic care and protection, the chances of survival of young ones is greater in viviparous organisms. In flowering plants, the zygote is formed inside the ovule. After fertilization, the sepals, petals, and stamens of the flower wither and fall off. Can you name a plant in which sepals remain attached? I guess the Solanaceae family have sepals attached after the formation of fruit, the fertilization of the flower. The pistil, however, remains attached to the plant. The zygote develops into the embryo and the ovules develop into the seed. The ovary develops into the fruit, which develops a thick wall called pericarp that is protective in function. Figure 1.8. After dispersal, seed germinate under favorable conditions to produce new plants. Figure 1.8, a few kind of fruits showing seeds and protective pericarp. So you can see these diagrams. S represents the seed and P represents a protective pericarp. Now let us look at the summary. I always say read the summary because sometimes the lines which are written in the summary are not present in the whole chapter, and you can miss out the question when they ask in like NEET exam or in the CBSE exams. You can easily miss out those questions because sometimes actually the lines are present in the summary which are not present in the whole chapter. So just read the summary, okay? Always read the summary. Reproduction enables a species to live live generation after generation. Reproduction enables a species to live generation after generation. Reproduction in organism can be broadly classified into asexual and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction does not involve the fusion of gametes. It is common in organisms that have a relatively simple organization, such as the fungi, algae, and some invertebrate animals. The offsprings formed by asexual reproduction are identical and can be referred to as clones. Zoospores, conidia, etc. are the most common asexual structures formed in several algae and fungi. Budding and gemule formation are the common asexual methods seen in lower animals. Prokaryotes and unicellular organisms reproduce asexually by cell division or binary fission of the parent cell. In several aquatic and terrestrial species of Angiosperms, structures such as runners, rhizomes, suckers, tubers, osset, etc. are capable of giving rise to new offspring. The method of asexual reproduction is generally referred to as vegetative reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves the formation and fusion of gametes. It is a complex and slower process as compared to asexual reproduction. Most of the higher animals reproduce almost entirely by sexual method. Events of sexual reproduction may be categorized into pre-fertilization, fertilization, and post-fertilization events. Pre-fertilization events include gametogenesis and gamete transfer, while post-fertilization events include the formation of zygote and embryogenesis. Organisms may be bisexual or unisexual. Sexuality in plants is varied, particularly in angiosperms. Due to the production of a diverse type of flowers, plants are defined as monoecious or dioecious. Flowers may be bisexual or unisexual flowers. Gametes are haploid in nature and usually a direct product of meiotic division, except in haploid organisms where gametes are formed by mitosis. Transfer of male gametes is an essential event in sexual reproduction. It is relatively easy in bisexual organisms. In unisexual animals, it occurs by copulation or simultaneous release. In angiosperms, a special process called pollination ensures transfer of pollen grains which carry the pollen grains to the stigma. Singam Ii fertilization occurs between the male and a female gametes. Singam Ii may occur either externally outside the body of organisms or internally inside the body. Singam Ii leads to formation of a specialized cell called zygote. The process of development of an embryo from the zygote is called embryogenesis. In animals, the zygote starts developing soon after its formation. Animals may be either oviparous or viviparous. Embryonal protection and care are better in viviparous organisms. In flowering plants, after fertilization, ovary develops into fruit and ovules mature into seeds. Inside the mature seed is a progenitor of the next generation, the embryo. Now, the summary is ended and the chapter is ended. If this video really helped you to increase the memory folds of this chapter or any other chapters, like other videos are helping you to increase the memory folds, just please like and subscribe the channel and comment down below if you want some clarification on some topics, or if you have doubts, you can ask. I'll try to answer them in an easy way and precise way. Thank you for looking at this video.